my recent video on Fiddlesticks build, I try to steer people kind of towards the easy option of like Proto Belt, because it's just, if like 99% of players should just kind of build it until they really get a handle on Fiddlesticks, in my opinion. But then I realized like I didn't include the runes, or like the idea for the runes, which for Fiddlesticks, if you're really just starting out on them, I would say Glacial should probably be your go-to. Glacial with Fiddlesticks with the Proto Belt, it's going to make it so that you're going to be able to stay onto an enemy, and that's going to be the most important part for you. So even if you have a bad ulti, right, a flash Q with the Glacial, it's going to be very hard for someone to get away from that. So that's why I would really recommend this, and then you're really not missing out on that much damage, if any at all. More likely than not, you're going to be giving yourself more damage with Glacial with this. So this would be a very basic rune setup for Fiddlesticks. And for the rest of the video, I'm going to be going very, very in depth with why you should go one thing or the other, or the values of them. So if that's not really your thing, I totally understand. This is what you probably want to be rocking with. And then for the build, check out the build video, links in the comments. So with Fiddlesticks, you have a lot of rune options, like a whole lot of them. Like he can use different keystones in the situations in which you should or shouldn't, or when they can gain extra value, changes a lot. So I would say Fiddlesticks' viable keystones are Electrocute, Dark Harvest, Predator, Aftershock, Glacial Augment, and Unsealed Spellbook. First Strike is interesting, but might not be. You have to give up Glacial Augment for it, and with Unsealed Spellbook, if you're giving up the Glacial Augment, you're giving up utility for the extra summoner spells, which have their own inherent utility, whereas with First Strike, you get extra gold. So this kind of functions like Dark Harvest in a way, where you get extra gold whenever you're ulting in. But if you're playing a standard Fiddlesticks game, if you're winning the team fights with your ulti, First Strike really isn't doing it, so you'd rather have the extra utility from the keystones themselves rather than the extra gold from already winning. That's my biggest problem with First Strike on Fiddlesticks, is like it becomes a win more rune. And when used in the early game, you're not a Talon, you're not an Echo, you don't actually deal that much damage on your initial attack on the enemy, unless it's just a point blank ulti, in which case it's a win more. So what are you going to do? Just for my sake, that we don't get lost during the video, let's go from left to right here. So starting with the Electrocute, this puts you in the Domination tree. The Domination tree is generally pretty good for Fiddlesticks. You do have it makes things more conditional, because all these runes require something. With Electrocute, it requires you hit 3 separate attacks or abilities. For Fiddlesticks, that's no problem at all. Whenever you're ulting in, you're ulting, smiting, queuing every single time without fail. There's your 3 procs, and you get the extra damage. Just to glance over the minor runes so I don't have to cover it with the other keystones, is with Sudden Impact, this is going to be giving you like hundreds of damage on your ultis, giving you more magic pin whenever you ult. And it's only on a 4-second cooldown too, so maybe you can get some extra use out of it with Proto Belt or something like that. But just on your initial ulti, that 6 magic pin, when you apply it to 5 targets, is where you really start getting the value. A lot of people like to compare this to Cheap Shot and just really do the early game damage, and that's not what it's about. Sudden Impact is going to be doing more about level 11 and onward. Whereas with Cheap Shot, yeah, you'll have more damage in the early game. Does Fiddlesticks care about the damage in the early game? No. You're farming, and then you're ulting. If you didn't kill the target with your ulti in a full combo, the Cheap Shot damage probably wasn't making or breaking it, big man. This rune is for trading in lane, or for champions that can't use the other 2 runes, basically, in this row. For the third rune here, you can go with Ghost Poro or Eyeball Collection. Ghost Poro, you do have to build up with your effigies, but the nice part about Ghost Poro is that it extends your vision duration, which is very, very useful for Fiddlesticks, because its effigies do last a pretty long time. So depending on the matchup, let's say if you had an invade matchup like Lee Sin or something, Ghost Poro is very, very nice just to litter your jungle with. If I was in like a farming matchup or something where didn't have to worry about that, I would probably just go with Eyeball Collection. It's a lot faster to stack up usually. And with Fiddlesticks, more often than non-solo queue, you're probably just going to be doing nothing until you start killing everyone back to back to back. And Eyeball Collection just gives you extra AP Christ as you're doing that. And then the more AP, the more useful your champion is generally. Okie doke. And then if we're going this tree, well, if we're going Electrocute, your good options are going to be Relentless Hunter or Ultimate Hunter. A lot of people I get a lot of questions about Ultimate Hunter on Fiddlesticks, because you want to have more ults. You're gonna be in position to have more ults if you have your mythic item completed and you have 2 points in your ulti. That's when you start blasting off ults. Ultimate Hunter doesn't actually change much for Fiddlesticks because you have your initial ulti at level 6 and you're waiting till level 7.5 to get your level 7.5, level 8 to get your second ulti off, and then you're probably waiting because you're probably in a lull state because you're waiting for a dragon to spawn, in which case you just blast an ulti onto a laner, and then if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Where does Ultimate Hunter come in this? It's not like you're casting it on cooldown. You're farming all your camps into a play. You would have to skip a camp, or even if you skip the camp, you would already had to have gotten kills prior, in which case Ultimate Hunter is kind of like First Strike, where I was saying it's kind of like a win more. So very hard rune to actually utilize on Fiddlesticks. You have to get kills on multiple different targets to build up the ulti. By the time you built it up, you're already level 11, and you can blast off ultis on cooldown kind of regardless of your build path. The way you get more ultis on Fiddlesticks is by itemizing ability haste early, which you can only do, you can do in different ways, but the best ways to do it is through building Crown of the Shadow Queen or Everfrost. So that will give you Lost Chapter, Kindle Gem, and then that's how you actually get more ultis off in Fiddlesticks in a real game, in a real situation. So I think you should just probably go with Relentless Hunter. This helps you reset onto the map, helps you get into wacky positions, which is very crucial for Fiddlesticks. You got to get into a lane bush, you got to get into the alcove, you got to walk all the way around the enemy's red side to get a gank onto their turret. You got to walk around a lot on this champion to get into position for your ulti. So this helps you with doing that. Can help you with, I already said, resetting onto the map, running into lanes, things like that. Ravenous Hunter is not necessary. The Omni-Vamp healing is pretty negligible. And then you don't really need a Genius Hunter unless you're running Predator. So with that being said, if we're running this page, basically always you want to get the secondary, Absolute Focus, Gathering Storm, and then double adaptive. You can go Scaling Health, Armor, or Magic Resist. Doesn't really matter. It just depends on the situation. So with Electrocute, didn't even mention that. We've just kind of gone through the whole tree here. Didn't even mention this. With Electrocute, the best part about it is that it adds more single target damage immediately. And when would that be useful? Well, if you have to kill a particular target. If the enemy has a single carry that you want to immediately kill. And that's a kind of hard question to answer. What would be the individual carry that you have to kill? Well, let's say the enemy has a Master Yi and you ulti onto him. The entire enemy team basically doesn't matter if that Master Yi is fed, if the whole game's revolving around him. So maybe something like that. If the enemy has a hyper carry, like a Cogmod, Jinx, I'm sure Jinx at least should come into play this season, right? It's her time to shine. She's going to get some Arcane buffs, So when the enemy has a single champion that you got to take out, Electrocute can kind of be the thing. It does take away from other things like the utility in Glacial Augment, more team fighting damage with something like Arcane Comet. Man, I'm just now noticing I didn't even mention Arcane Comet in the initial runes. Whatever, dude. People would have been interested at least. Whatever. So yeah, single target damage onto, that's Electrocute. With Predator, we're going to be running the same thing. You could run a Genius Hunter if you wanted to. And then same secondary rooms probably, because if you're not getting this AP, you're really missing out. It's so hard to justify something like this or like this to give up that much AP. If a Hextech Flash is getting you an extra kill, that's a Dark Seal compared to, what is this like? This is Gathering Storm plus Absolute Focus. It's kind of like an Amp Tome and then goes into a Needlessly Large Rod the later the game goes. So yeah, with Predator, I don't like Predator at all. I've talked about it a lot, but basically my consensus on it is that it can kind of be a necessary evil in solo queues sometimes, in the sense that if your laners are going to... God, it's so complicated to explain Predator. If your laners are going to die without ganks, then it's something to do. If your laners have CC or if the enemy has vulnerable lanes, then it's something to do. It's something to abuse in solo queue. It doesn't do anything in the mid to late game. That's my biggest problem with it. And to amplify, to have a catalyst to your levels 1 to 5 on Fiddlesticks is some of the dumbest, most useless stuff like ever. It happens to work out because Fiddlesticks has point and click CC and enemy laners are bad. Fiddlesticks' damage is laughable early game. If enemy laners can actually find a way to die to Fiddlesticks early, congrats to them. They're the MVP, not the Predator rune, dude. It's also received nerfs in the preseason here, I think. I hope so, if I just said it right there. But yeah, this rune really, like, it's just for the laning phase, minutes 1 to 14. And if you don't get something off it through primarily cheese, then it's not useful. The thing is, you will be able to get something off it more often than not in solo queue, so it's a weird thing. But it's not the truth of Fiddlesticks. That's the main thing that I want to drive home. So it's not just about, like, can you siphon a win out of your solo queue game with Predator. You do 3 camps, you reset, you do your Raptors red, and then you fight for Scuttle, and then you Predator into a lane. And then if it works, it works. If it doesn't, dang it, you know? But at least it gives you an option to do that play, right? Compare that to a Glacial Augment Fiddlesticks. You're going to clear your 6 camps and then do Scuttle if it's there. If not, or if you can't fight it or something, then you reset, go back to your camps, full clear down again, reset, buff, level 6 into a gank, right? It's a lot longer until you have the actuality to play, or not to play, but to have an impact. And in solo queue, more often than not, the game's not over, but you would have rather had an impact because the game deteriorates. It falls off the face of a cliff too soon. So that's where you run into problems with not running Predator on Fiddlesticks, I guess. Yeah, but it's mostly just a player problem. So yeah, a necessary evil. I think I'll leave it at that. With Dark Harvest, this is a very, very situational rune. It'd be if you're farming for a very, very long time. So I mean, like, until level 11, you're 0-0-0 until level 11, and then Dark Harvest can take over as a team fighting rune, especially if team comps are designed to go very hyper late game. Dark Harvest can be viable, and it would only be for a team fighting comp. So let's say if you have multiple tanks on your team and the enemy has champions where it's fine for you to scale against them. That's where Dark Harvest can come into play, but it's very, very niche and not really that interesting either. It's kind of like yeah, I'll just leave it at that. With Arcane Comet, people don't, like, I don't know, people just don't understand Arcane Comet on Fiddlesticks. I've been running it for a very, very long time. I don't know how long, but ever since the rework of Fiddlesticks, like, I kind of discovered it as an option. I was running Electrocute for a very, very long time in season, I don't know, 9, 10, I can't really remember. But with Arcane Comet, damaging a champion hurls a Comet at their location, but most people don't know this part. If Arcane Comet is on cooldown, you reduce its remaining cooldown by dealing single target damage, area of effect damage, and damage over time. Fiddlesticks can do all of this. So it's very, if you ulti in at minimum, you can get like 2 Arcane Comet procs off. But where you're hitting multiple targets, get this, the single target damage, the area of effect damage is going to be reducing that Arcane Comet even more. So you're able to get like 2 or 3, maybe even 4 Arcane Comets off in a full combo. And the Arcane Comets are AoE, whereas with Dark Harvest, Electrocute, all of those are like single target. So you're able to achieve a lot more of like this team fighting utility in a very seemingly wacky rune for Fiddlesticks. And get this, the cooldown goes down with level 2. If Fiddlesticks loves to farm. So we get to a level 16 with this. Good luck, man. Good luck to the enemy team. You're probably getting 5 or 6 Arcane Comets off at that point. A very interesting rune. I really, really like Arcane Comet. And nobody, I'm pretty sure nobody in the world runs this on Fiddlesticks but me. Fair enough. It's a weird rune. You're going to look weird running it. It doesn't really do anything in the early game, and that's totally fine. The main thing with Arcane Comet right now is that you're giving up Glacial Augment for it. So you can't do it into champions that can kite you. It has to be into champions that stand their ground or move into your team. That's a very big deal with the comparison of Glacial Augment with most of the Keystones right now. So if the enemy doesn't dive into you, it's very hard to actually achieve the damage rune. But the nice part about the damage runes is that it gives you the extra compensation against champions that dive into your team, because usually that's tankier champions, or at least bruiser champions that you want to eat through. You want to eat through their Sterax. You want to eat through their damage reduction abilities. Congrats to Irelia for pressing W. I now deal 0 damage. So with Arcane Comet, that puts us into the sorcery tree. It's a little odd. Nullifying Orb or Nimbus Cloak are your good options. If the enemy has like literally any AP, probably go Nullifying Orb. Champions like LeBlanc, Vigar, Seraphine, Null Orb is very, very efficient against. But Nimbus Cloak is also pretty useful, giving you the extra movement speed whenever you ulti in. So, well, whenever you get your smite off, whenever you ulti in. And then same deal, Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm. And then for the secondary runes, if we're going with this, you can go a scaling thing like Free Boots and Approach Velocity. Approach Velocity giving you the extra movement speed towards them when you land your E or your ulti, whenever you fear them with the ulti, so that can be useful. You can also go Futures Market to accelerate your build path. This is very, very, very strong in season 12 with things like Shadow Flame to just get to that. Shadow Flame, Proto Belt, Medjai's, Sorkpin Boots, bam, bam, bam. You have it so quickly in solo queue, it's insane. You could also go Sudden Impact Eyeball Collection to give you the AP and extra damage whenever you ulti in. This is very, very efficient. Even the Ghost Poro, right? Because if we're playing for like a later game. But yeah, since this is the enemies coming into us, this is totally fine. So it really depends. Really depends on what. So this can give you like the magic pin early, but this can give you access to more damage that you otherwise wouldn't have, right? Because if you're running this, then you don't have the Sudden Impact or the Eyeball Collection. So I suppose you're playing for 4th Dragon-ish with something like this, whereas with this is like playing for a 3rd Dragon, like kind of win the game, have control over it at all stages. Free Boots and Futures Market is probably just going to give you a whole lot more leniency in solo queue. But if you're playing in a competitive game or in a pro league, Sudden Impact and Eyeball Collection would be totally fine. Okay, fair warning, I'm getting a little bit tired here at the end of this, but yeah, so for the Keystone Aftershock, this is very niche on Fiddlesticks. I'll be honest, I haven't really tried it with the Season 12 or even in Season 11 very much. What was strong about Aftershock on Fiddlesticks and could be strong in the future was the aspect where you became very mid-rangey and you could survive the enemy. Now, let's say if you had Aftershock plus Crown of the Shadow Queen and the enemy has a bunch of champions that dive onto you or stand their ground, mostly if they stood their ground, right? Because you're just standing there hitting, you need to survive blow for blow. Aftershock can really have a pretty big impact. So with Aftershock, we want to go Font of Life. This is going to give our allies more effective HP. And most importantly, Demolish and Shield Bash don't do anything for us. And then Conditioning every single time. Second Wind and Bone Plating are laning tools. And we don't lane, so we don't need those. And then Overgrowth is going to give us more HP for farming, basically. Whereas Revitalize, the heal and shield power, you're not going to heal that much. You're probably not going to heal the Ruby Crystal that this gives you with the Revitalize in a single team fight. If you did, maybe having the HP would be more useful. It's really weird from there. And then probably just Absolute Focus Gathering Storm. It's very, 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 very hard to beat this with the secondary runes. And the other things would be like, right, the Free Boots and then Approach Velocity to stay on them, but we don't need to stay on them because we're standing our ground. We don't need to accelerate our build path because we're playing so mid-rangey. So, we deal some damage, take some damage, and then kind of hope that we survive at the end of it too. You could go Sudden Impact and Eyeball Collection. I'm not sure how I feel about this with Aftershock because I haven't really tested it, but yeah, the go-to is probably this. And with the build path with Aftershock 2, I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, with Crown of the Shadow Queen, that makes you significantly tankier. So then we would go Sorkpin Boots. Crown, Sork Boots, and then what was very interesting about this with the old jungle item, the old like blue jungle, AP jungle item, was that you could go like Zonias and Banshees very easily, but that's not exactly the same case. I feel like you would still just go Shadow Flame because you get the HP from it, and then from there, you don't really have an AP or an armor and an MR item. So maybe just choose a Banshee's Veil or a Zonia's. It gets weird from there, and it really becomes situational. So I would have to see like a specific game in front of me. But Aftershock is an option on Fiddlesticks, and it is viable. It's just you need the right team comp. You give up damage for it. You need to be playing into the right champions, but it's very interesting that it works. Okay, and the main attraction here, the big shebang on Fiddlesticks, in my opinion, in Season 12 is Glacial Augment. Holy guacamole, what a rune. They finally gave Fiddlesticks a rune. Because all these other runes we were talking about, right? Damage, damage, damage. Well, gank noobs, damage, damage, survive damage. Glacial Augment, it's like, finally, yes. What makes Fiddlesticks so strong is his CC. He has a point-and-click stun, or a point-and-click fear, that requires a QSS from the enemy somewhat. Ulti fears targets that he's initially on, and a silence. Oh my god, a silence and a slow packed into one ability. Like, that's where so much utility comes out of this champion. Shout out to Cho'Gath. Anyways, with Glacial Augment, now whenever you CC a target, it emits those freeze rays that it used to whenever you hit them with an active item, the one active item in the game, and then slows them and reduces the damage that it deals to your allies, not to you. So it's more of a balance around being a support rune, but Fiddlesticks abuses this rune like no one's ever seen. And since you're just team fighting with your team, you're either skirmishing or you're team fighting. You're never 1v1ing with Fiddlesticks unless you're point blank ulting and they instantly die, who cares? So the best part about Glacial Augment 2 is that you're providing for your allies in reducing the damage that the enemies deal with it too. Like, I say it was the best part. The best part is that they're slowed. Jesus. So you ulti in, they're slowed, and then you Q, and then you E them, and then they're slowed again, and then you're all this time you're waddling on top of them, and then you can actually get a drain off. And it's very important that you get a full drain for Fiddlesticks, because at the very end it deals more damage based on the target's missing health. So it provides so much utility. You can get your full damage off that you couldn't prior. If the targets are slowed, not only does it set you up for more damage, but it just creates a lot of problems for the enemy and sets your allies up for more damage. It's such a crazy keystone for Fiddlesticks. 25-second cooldown every time you gank, it's up. If the enemy's attacking you, you fear them, they're slowed. It's harder for them to chase you down. It's so good. It's so good. The freeze rays are AoE, so in a team fight, even if you're just getting onto the enemy front line, it's freezing their backline. It's hard for their backline to hit you or your team. Such a useful rune. So it puts us in the inspiration tree. All three of these runes are useful on Fiddlesticks. I would say free boots are going to be the most consistent. Accelerating your build path into Sorkpin boots, into your Shadow Flame, very, very important. I think most players would probably go for perfect timing. Zhonya's actually sucks a lot on Fiddlesticks. I hate to say it, but people still haven't figured it out. Unless the enemy has champions that instantly kill you, like LeBlanc, I don't know, Kassadin, Fizz, where you would need the Zhonyas, don't get it. Like, just walk on top of the enemy with your ulti, and then if you can't survive, then maybe you played the fight wrong, or maybe you ulted at the wrong time, or if you died instantly, did your team win the fight? Did you win the game? Like, I don't know. But with perfect timing, it gives you the one-time stopwatch, and it can be useful, but giving up the free boots and acceleration of saving the 300 gold, getting into the Sorkpin boots faster, 10 movement speed's useful. It's hard to beat this. And then Hextech flashes for cheesing losers. Like, there's no other way to put it for Fiddlesticks. That rune sucks. And then we're going to go futures market. This lets us buy items a lot sooner. Again, accelerate the build path is so insane. If things are going bad, at least you can pick up a needlessly large rod at some point and then actually have some value with it. And then for the fourth row here, you're really battling over Cosmic Insight versus Approach Velocity. With Cosmic Insight, you get the item haste and then the Summoner Spell haste, which is, you know, if you have the Everfrost, if you have the Proto Belt, you can reduce their cooldowns. Which isn't necessarily that useful because you're not using them on cooldown. But then the Summoner Spell haste, having your flash up more often, can be kind of game changing around level 11, where having your ulti and flash up is very, very important. But with Approach Velocity, it's going to be generally useful at all stages of the game. You get more movement speed to champions that are slowed, and that movement speed bonus is doubled when you slow them. So every time you ulti in, not only is the enemy slow, but you have more movement speed towards them. Have you ever heard of a more overpowered combo for a champion such as Fiddlesticks? Secondary runes, you guessed it. Absolute Focus and Gathering Storm. That's awesome. And you're really never going to change that. Just the free AP is impossible to beat with these other minor runes. So that's the keystones on Fiddlesticks. I hope that gives you better insight on what you can run, when you should run them, or anything like that. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them, and I might get to them one day. But yeah, hope that helps. This is going to be probably the only rune video I make, unless like I see another reason to, but at least for season 12, because so many people come to me for Fiddlesticks. So I hope that I could give you the insight on it. Alrighty, thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe, and yeah, see you in the next video. Peace.